Fontaine is the land of hydro and justice. It's the 5th region of the game, added on August 16th of 2023. As of 4.2, Fontaine's story has been wrapped up, and while there might be more additions to the region later, the bulk of the region is most likely done. So, let's take a look back at Fontaine. The city of Fontaine is large and arguably the most impressive of all the other main cities. Personally, I really like it. It's grandiose and the white architecture, contrasting with the blues of the water running throughout the city, and the greens of the plants look really good. The environment of Fontaine is really pretty, especially underwater. Exploring during the afternoon when the sun is at its peak and shines through the water can be mesmerizing. It can be bright and vibrant with various seaweeds, shells, and creatures dotting the seafloor, or dull and dark with the wreckage of sunken ships or the metal of the fortress of Meripede. The exploration gameplay loop of wander around until you see a chest or a puzzle or a challenge remains, of course, but with the added bonus of being underwater. It is probably the biggest change to Genshin's gameplay flow yet. The movement and abilities you can use are completely different, and it's a great way to shake up the game. It feels different, but familiar. A significant amount of Fontaine is underwater too, but there's still land to explore. The abilities you use underwater are from xenochromatic creatures. The Armored Crab gives you a projectile that can be buffed if you use it as a counter. The Hunter Ray gives you access to water slashes that can cut through vines and enemies. The Blubber Beast gives you a sonar ability. The Ball Octopus gives you a beam, and the Jellyfish gives you a remote detonated bomb. Fontaine also introduces the Arc system, which adds Numa and Osea. Numa is yellow and Osea is purple. Outside of puzzles, it's not too important. Fontaine characters are aligned one way or the other and have attacks that trigger whichever they have. Hitting enemies of the opposing alignment will trigger an effect, usually a stun. This isn't necessary to do though, and just makes some of the enemies easier. You won't really notice it if you're using built characters. The new puzzles are interesting too. Some use the Arc system, while others are based around the newer technology of Fontaine, the cameras. Just as every region that came before, there's a lot of puzzles that use mechanics that are exclusive to Fontaine, and sometimes even exclusive to certain areas within Fontaine. There are also the old familiar challenges like killing a group of enemies or collecting a bunch of particles in a certain amount of time. The enemies you'll encounter are varied, and sometimes the way you fight them will be too. On land, the differences depend on how built your team is, but that doesn't matter underwater, since you're restricted to the xenochromatic creature's abilities. All the new enemies are okay, but the Fatui operatives stand out the most. They apply a life bond, which stops your character from being healed, and corrosion, which drains your HP, which makes for a pretty good combo. They have a counter, which is pretty cool too. As of the making of this video, Chevreuse is the latest character to be added, and so far, Fontaine hasn't really added any bad characters. At worst, they're average. Visually, the elemental bursts of these characters are the best the game has seen since Raiden, and gameplay-wise, they've all had unique playstyles. Until Navia, every Fontaine 5-star had some sort of HP drain mechanic, which, with the introduction of Farina, whose entire kit benefits from her team having HP drain, has shaken up the meta. Fontaine's story, despite a few hiccups, is really good. It tackles some pretty serious topics, my favorite being revenge, and has some heartbreaking and touching moments. The Archon quests have 5 acts in total, although one of them feels like a waste of time. Other than that one bad egg, each act is relevant in its own way and gives away big hints about what's really going on, even if you might not realize it at the time. It's very fulfilling for observant players to pick up details and put the pieces together. However, the story can feel like a bit of a slog to play through. It's a lot of dialogue and can feel like a bunch of cutscenes. This is the spoiler part of the video. If you don't want to hear it, I'll give you 3 seconds to click off. I will keep this recap brief for the sake of time and keeping the video from becoming 20 minutes. Fair warning though, the story is meant to be told through gameplay and is much better experienced that way. I urge you to play it first and treat this as a way to jog your memory. Fontaine's Archon quests reveal that the previous Archon, Egeria, who is an Oceanid by the way, transformed some Oceanids into humans because of their desire to live on land. She does this using primordial seawater, which means if the now human Oceanids come into contact with primordial seawater again, they will return to being oceanids. Celestia doesn't approve of this and creates a prophecy that a bunch of primordial seawater will rise and turn all Fontainians back into oceanids. Focalors, the new Archon, deems this unjust and devises a plan to save Fontaine. She splits herself in two, one part divine, Focalors, and one part human, Farina. This is so she can build up enough energy to destroy the Hydronosis in secret while Farina plays the part of the Archon. Destroying the Gnosis means returning absolute control over the element of Hydro to the Dragon Sovereign, Nervalet, who can then change the properties of primordial seawater to have no effect on Fontainians, which he does. Foreshadowing is the greatest strength of Genshin storytelling. Many details, big and small, are hinted at throughout every act. For example, you're told that all water eventually ends up at the Fountain of Lucine, and you can guess that the women who are dissolved ended up there too before it's revealed. Outside of the Archon quests, the character stories and side quests contribute to the overall narrative too. As I mentioned before, Fontaine has several themes like revenge and how they tie to justice. Carol's death at the hands of the people of Fontaine and Vautrin taking revenge for her, Linny and Lynette taking revenge for Caesar's death and framing, and in the Roses and Muskets event, Veronique and Baptiste attempted revenge of their mother's murder. These stories all tackle how revenge relates to justice and bring up several ethical questions. With that all considered, Fontaine is easily a good pick for best region in the game. Many of the reasons it's great are similar to what made Sumeru so great too. It shakes up the exploration with the addition of swimming, it shook up the meta, the story has interesting characters and themes, and keeps you invested by withholding just enough information that keeps you from putting all the pieces together until the very end, and everything just clicks. I genuinely can't think of much to complain about that wouldn't just apply to the game as a whole, rather than just the region. If Fontaine is the new standard for Genshin and they keep improving, I can't imagine what Natlan is going to be like. Thank you for watching.